Okay, so I've just realised that for some reason my visualiser doesn't pause properly, it just freezes the screen. So obviously you will have heard the food processor in the first video. So obviously while I wash my hands, I actually pressed stop, okay? So this will be a second part of the video. So I'm picking up from where I prepared my chicken, okay? So I'm going from the chicken and I'm now going to show you how to coat them, okay? So for this process, what you need to do is you need to take back those bowls that we had earlier. So we've got our flour, we've got our bread, and we have our egg, okay? With this, you need to make sure that you are following my instructions very clearly, otherwise this will go wrong, okay? So the order for you to do this in is you need to put it into your flour first, then the egg, then the flour, to then follow by putting it straight onto our piece of greaseproof paper on our baking tray, okay? The reason why I have 3 different size bowls is to make everything much quicker and easier. So we're going to take our flour bowl and we are literally going to take our chicken and we are going to scrape all of that chicken into the flour. So every single bit, okay? So every single bit of that chicken is now in my bowl, okay? On top of that, what we are then going to do is we are going to use a spoon. If you don't want to get your hands back in, that is fine. And we are going to make sure that we are getting each piece of chicken completely covered in flour, okay? So obviously you can get your hands in and get all completely mix it all in together, okay? So it's personal choice on whether you want to use a fork, a spoon or your hands, okay? But just make sure that everything is stirred together to the point that every single piece of that chicken is completely covered, okay? The reason why I say obviously it's your choice on this bit, okay? So I've shown you, obviously with this bit, I've used a spoon. But I'm going to tell you the next bit, you're going to need to use your hands anyway. So it is your personal choice on whether you want to just get your hands straight in anyway, okay? So what we're going to do now is we're going to take each of those chicken covered pieces, okay, so the flour covered chicken, sorry, okay, and we're going to take a piece of the chicken, so it looks like this. We're going to dip it into the egg, as you can see there. We're going to turn it over, make sure it gets completely covered in the egg, hold up, let it drip, make sure there's no excess egg on there, and then we're going to place it into our flour bowl, our breadcrumb bowl, okay? And literally this will then get coated in our breadcrumbs. So obviously it gets lost in there once I start stirring it, okay? So we're going to make sure that that gets completely covered in breadcrumbs, okay? We want a nice even coating, which would then go straight onto our baking tray. Okay, and obviously as you can see already, I'm starting to get some bits of bread stuck to my fingers. That is part of the recipe, I'm afraid, okay? So there is no way of avoiding that. You just need to embrace it, okay? Because obviously at the end, you will be able to clean your hands, okay? So it's literally taking your piece of chicken, putting it into the egg, covering it in the egg, making sure any excess egg is dripping off, drop it into the flour, cover it in flour. I sometimes leave mine in there so that I can lay them all out on the tray at the end, okay? It is personal preference. When picking up your chicken, make sure as well that you've not got any extra flour in there, because obviously at the end of the day, we're not going to want this bowl of egg filled with loads of flour, okay? So what I advise is giving your chicken that little bit of a shake to make sure that flour falls off, okay? So again, we're going into the egg, covering it completely in egg, letting any excess drain off, and then dropping it into our breadcrumbs and rotating it in there to get it completely covered. Okay, and we're just going to do that until each piece of chicken is covered in all of them. The functions of these ingredients, okay, so the flour is there to create a barrier to keep the moisture in our chicken, okay. It also is the layer in which gives our chicken a lot of flavour, because that's where our seasoning is, okay? So we've got our flour to help keep the moisture in and add flavour. The egg is there to help our chicken actually have the bread stuck to it. Because if we didn't have the egg, obviously the bread would just fall straight off because it's already got that first layer, which means nothing is going to stick to it, okay? so we are getting everything covered. The breadcrumbs is to help create that nice golden crispy layer at the top of our chicken goujons, okay? So you need to make sure for me that you are getting these completely evenly coated, okay? So it doesn't take long to do it, all right? But you need to make sure that you're really focusing on what you are doing. What I will say as well at the end of this recipe is any leftover egg, flour or breadcrumbs will have to go in the bin. The reason for it is because it has had raw chicken put on it. So obviously it can't be stored, it can't be left to use at a later date, okay? Because obviously it's got the raw food poisoning bacteria inside it, okay? And we don't want to cause anybody to get ill, okay? So make sure as you are doing this, you are keeping yourself nice and clean. You will notice as well, as I've been doing this, I'm only using one hand to do this. I'm not doing it just because it helps mean that I'm making less mess, but it's also for a very good reason. But obviously if this hand is covered in raw chicken and raw eggs, so this one hand, this hand is completely clean and no bacteria, which means I can move my pieces of equipment as needed. So if something got in the way, it's nice and easy for me to then take my clean hand to move it. Okay, so say for example is I needed to itch my nose, or I needed to move my bowl because I was struggling to get to the chicken, or there was a piece of chicken in my way, so obviously I've had to move that and then maybe I've knocked the whole bowl. Or it might be that you want to actually hold the bowl still like I am with my bread to make sure that everything, it doesn't make a complete mess, okay? So I'm nearly done with my chicken now, okay? So you will see on this, hopefully, how my fingers are starting to get really covered in egg and breadcrumbs, okay? So as you can see there, look, see, I'm all covered, okay? That is normal, like I said earlier. It will happen. There was no way to avoid that, okay? Well, if you really want to avoid it, you could wear gloves, but obviously you will struggle to grip, and it is not as safe wearing plastic gloves as I discussed back in year 7, okay? So we're going to make sure that everything is getting up cleaned at the end of this anyway. So there's no worries if you do get anything on your hands in the first place, okay? So I believe this is my last piece. I'm going to have to check at the end, but I think it's my last piece of chicken now. Okay, so I'm getting that in there, making sure it's getting all that breadcrumbs on it. So my bowl is starting to get very full of chicken, as you can see here. So it doesn't look like there's much breadcrumbs in there really, but when you look at the whole bowl, it looks like there's loads, but it's because it's all chicken. Okay, so let me just check my flour bowl. Yep, that is all of my egg and my chicken all sorted now. So you will see in this bowl there's not a lot of egg actually left, okay? So I'm just going to knock that out the way so that you can see my final bowl, okay? So we've got now our bowl with our chicken in, which is now covered with flour, egg and breadcrumbs. So now the final stage is getting each of these pieces onto our baking tray so that they can be cooked in the oven. These are cooked in the oven at 180 degrees, okay? So these are cooked. It's not very hot. Obviously, if you've got a gas oven, it will be around gas mark 4, okay? 4 or 5, obviously depends on what type of oven you got. Each one is slightly different, okay? So you will need to lay each of these pieces of chicken out and make sure that there is a little bit of space between them so they've got plenty of space to cook. Okay, obviously if you want to make shapes in them, because obviously the bread's going to go hard, you can create little shapes if you want. So you can see there, you can make little shapes if you want to, or you can just keep them completely straight. It is your choice, okay? But you need to make sure that you are using the most of that tray, because obviously we don't want to waste any of our baking parchment. Obviously if at home you've got any of the non-stick trays, you can use them. You don't necessarily have to use the baking paper if you don't want to. Okay, so I'm nearly done getting all of my chicken onto my baking tray now. You can see it's getting very full because I have done a double recipe, remember. Okay, obviously if I'd done a single recipe, it wouldn't look this full. Okay, and it also means that you would have a little bit more space, okay? Obviously at home, if you've got loads and loads of pieces, you could use 2 baking trays if you wanted to. Okay, so that is all of my chicken out now. Okay, so obviously this excess that I've got on my hand, my advice for you would be to use the greaseproof paper itself to help get the majority of that off, because we don't want that going down our drain and blocking the sinks. So what I do is I use the corner of the greaseproof paper to scrape it off my fingers, as you can see here. Okay, so I'm scraping it off my fingers, one finger at a time. Okay, that piece, some people in the past have wanted to keep that extra bit of bread and they've made like a bit of like a breadcrumb little ball. That is fine. Or you can literally tear off that piece of greaseproof and put that straight in the bin. Okay, it is your personal choice. Obviously, when our hands are covered in egg and stuff like this, as you can see, obviously it can get very nasty. It's very sticky. As you can see here, it's quite sticky on my fingers. This point, we need to wash our hands, okay? So once we have washed our hands, we will then go and put these in the oven. You need to remember to use your oven gloves. Make sure that you are doing everything properly. These are in the oven for 20 minutes. You know these are cooked when you cut through them and they are no longer pink on the inside. They should be completely white in the middle, okay? So please feel free to rewind this video, watch it back as many times as you need to make sure that your instructions are done to your best ability. Go back to your descriptions on Firefly. There will be some extra bits of information of what I expect for you to have. So like I said earlier, there is the success criteria. There is the example layout that you could use and many other things like that that I've got there for you. Okay, so please make sure that you're getting all of this done. Take a little photo of your instructions when they're wrote out. If you want to give this a go at home, feel free to take it that step further, and if you do, I'd love to see how it looks at the end. Okay, if you wanted to present it on a plate and things like that. Okay, so well done guys. Make sure you get all this wrote down in as much detail as you can. Thank you very much.